What do you think of the Messiah? This is the question that Jesus asks his rivals, his opponents, the Pharisees today. This is the question he wants them to ponder, and I think it's the question he wants us to ponder too. What do we think of the Messiah? Who is the Messiah? Now, the Pharisees insist that the Messiah is the son of David, and this was, of course, the long tradition of messianic expectation within Judaism, that someone from David's line, a descendant of David, would rise up and lead the Jewish people. But their insistence that the Messiah must be David's son is not only, or I think even primarily, about genealogy. What they're also saying is that the Messiah needs to be someone like David, someone who led like David, someone with David's skills and abilities. Many of you will know, if you've read 1st and 2nd Samuel, that David was the first really successful king of Israel. And he was famous and beloved for a few things. Firstly, for his authority as a king. He was able to unite the tribes of Israel for really the first time into one cohesive nation. Secondly, and most importantly, David was known as a mighty warrior, a general and a soldier himself, who successfully won battles both against his internal enemies within Israel, but especially against external enemies, the threats to Israel's safety. This is what David was famous for, his authority and his power, and especially his martial prowess. And so the expectation was that the Messiah would need to be someone like that, a powerful administrator, a powerful and mighty soldier, someone who could unite Israel, defeat Israel's enemies, and draw together really the world into peaceful recognition of the one true God. The path, though, was through power, political power and military power. Jesus is clearly questioning their view, questioning this understanding of who the Messiah would be. We don't hear today Jesus giving his own answer to his question of what he thinks of the Messiah, who he thinks the Messiah will be. We get the strong impression here that he definitely disagrees with the Pharisees' understanding, with the received in common understanding at the time. He doesn't tell us his answer, though. In many ways, of course, Jesus' life and ministry was his answer. He claimed in various ways to indeed be the promised Messiah, and he showed himself, though, to be a rather different kind of leader than David, right? We Christians reading this in the 21st century have the advantage of hindsight. We can look back and we know how Jesus' story ends and culminates. We Christians tend to agree with Jesus that he was the Messiah. But I think we have to admit, Jesus does not fit the mold of who anyone expected the Messiah to be. The Pharisees' position was the common position. Jesus was not a powerful king, had no administration, wasn't a warrior, couldn't fight, didn't lead any armies, he didn't even have much money. Jesus ended his life not on the throne of a united and free Israel. He ended his life dying on a cross, executed as a criminal by the real power in Israel, at that time, the Roman state. Who in their right mind expects or hopes for a savior who can't even save himself from the cross? And yet, that's what we insist and continue to insist, that yes, this man, this seemingly powerless, unimportant person, this is the Messiah. This is the promised one, the one who will usher in that era of true understanding of God, that era of peace, that era finally when justice can reign. Part of what we can learn, not only from Jesus' teaching here, but by paying attention to the gospel as a whole, part of what we learn is that God has many surprises in store for us, right? The Messiah that we got is not the Messiah that we expected, or even the Messiah that we wanted. This won't be the first or the last time that human expectations don't line up with God's will. It won't be the first or last time that human expectations don't line up with the reality of the situation. And I think that's part of the problem that Jesus is identifying here, and something that I think we can learn as we get older if we're paying attention. We human beings are extremely clever creatures. No one can doubt that. Certainly living in the 21st century, just look around you at everything that we've made and everything that we can do. No one can doubt our cleverness. The problem is, it seems that we humans are often too clever for our own good. Too clever. Problem isn't not enough cleverness. The problem is often just a bit too much. We start life, though, not all that clever. As infants, we don't have a lot of intellectual capability. As infants, our world is really defined, I think, by three things: hunger, thirst, and sleepiness. And that's all we really know, and that's all we really care about, right? If you've spent any time with an infant, you know those are the three things they care about. Those are the three things they're paying attention to. But we grow quickly, not only physically, but mentally. We grow really quickly. New feelings arise, new understandings. We begin to recognize other people in our world. And very soon, surprisingly soon, we begin to understand and use language. And that brings new ideas and new concepts. And very quickly, we human beings develop within our minds a model, basically, of the world around us. And we can know an extraordinarily large amount of things. By the time we are adults, every single human being is an extraordinary thing. At this point in time, scientists still maintain that the human brain is the most complicated thing that exists in the universe, at least that we found so far. We're the most complicated thing that exists, every single one of us. And I don't just mean the geniuses of the world. I mean all of us, even the average and mediocre ones. We are extraordinary things, extraordinarily smart, extraordinarily clever, full of knowledge and experiences and memories and desires and expectations. And we're really good at modeling the world. We're even really good at shaping the world. The problem, though, is that having reached this great height, having reached adulthood, we often fall into the error of thinking that we can see everything, that we can perceive everything, that we can maybe know everything, that we can understand everything. The truth is, for all of our extraordinary ability, for all of our wonderful intellectual capacity, the world that we live in, if we're honest and we pause and we look, the world we live in still utterly transcends us. It's much bigger and grander and stranger and more surprising than we can perceive, understand, or even imagine. It's one of the most interesting things about science is even as science expands vastly the borders of our knowledge, it also exposes all of the mysteries that we still don't seem to have any better handle on than we ever had before. But we easily forget this. We become impressed with our cleverness, and we think we've got everything figured out. But again, we turn and we reflect on the life of Jesus, and we are reminded, for all our cleverness, the Messiah that we got is not the Messiah that we expected. And indeed, often the things we think we need are not the things that are best for us. Often the solutions that we prefer to our problems are not really the solutions that will help us. Often the answers we prefer to our questions are not the right answers. What I think we can discover, what I hope that spiritual practice helps us to discover, what I hope that maturity helps us to discover, is that what we need is not really more cleverness, certainly not more confidence in our cleverness, but what we need is a little bit of humility, just a little bit of intellectual humility. We need to admit the human mind is incredible, but it's not perfect. We can know a lot, but we're not omniscient. We can do a lot, but we're not omnipotent. There may indeed be truths, important truths, that we can't perceive, understand, comprehend, or even imagine. The answers to our prayers may not actually be what we're praying for. I think that humility, that intellectual humility, is the real foundation, the real ground of what I would call genuine faith. Genuine faith. Not blind faith, not just believing something because some authority figure told you to. That's not genuine faith, not blind faith. Also not arrogant faith. A lot of arrogance passes for faith in our world. Simply asserting something and being sure that you're right. Actually, that's the very overconfident cleverness we need to let go of. No, genuine faith isn't blind or arrogant. Genuine faith is humble, hearing a question and actually thinking it through, facing a problem and admitting that we may not have all the answers or resources to fix it. This is the faith that Christ calls us to. When he asks us, "What do you think of the Messiah?" he's not asking for blind faith or arrogant faith, but that humble and curious faith. A faith that's not about dodging tough questions, nor is it about asserting doctrinaire answers, but coming to terms with the fact that we don't know everything. We have to take action in this world. We have to make decisions, choices every day. We often don't have all the information we need to make the best choices. And just admitting that, having that humility, that's the ground of real faith. A faith that begins when we know we can't know or do everything. That the world is indeed much bigger and grander and stranger and more surprising than we can perceive or understand or imagine. Now, the good news is that God does come to help us transcend those limits. Jesus comes into the world to help us move beyond the limits of our smallness. But in order to access that grace, right, we have to let go of the illusion that we have all that power within ourselves. Let go of the illusion that we can figure everything out. Let go of the illusion that we can even perceive everything that we would need to see if we were going to solve all of our problems. Accepting that humility, admitting that humility, can be that first step in letting us live in faith, can help to give us that faith to follow a crucified Messiah. As strange and ridiculous as those two words are put together, that we could follow a crucified Messiah, that we could put our trust in a powerless peasant, that we could put our expectations of God's salvation in this person who ruled with love rather than with force. If we can make that strange and ridiculous choice, though, I think we can discover not only that the world is bigger and grander and stranger and more surprising than we ever expected, but also that the world is, or at least can be, much more beautiful than it often seems to be. Because indeed, God has many surprises in store for us, like a Messiah who dies and then won't stay dead. As we work to build into the future as a community, as we struggle to keep the light of love and kindness alive in this world, as we work to follow Jesus, crucified and risen, let's leave some room for God to surprise us. Let's live and move and work in faith, not blind faith, not arrogant faith, but that humble faith, born of the simple acceptance that we don't and can't know everything. My friends, may it be so. Amen.